Today, we're taking a deep dive into one of the largest and most critical pieces of infrastructure on the entire planet, India's absolutely massive irrigation system. It's this incredibly complex network that is the lifeline for feeding more than 1 billion people.
To really get a handle on the scale, let's just start with one number: 52%. That's it. That's the slice of India's total farmland that completely depends on irrigation. We're talking more than half the country's agriculture. But, that number also shows you the flip side of the coin. While 52% is a monumental achievement, it means that 48%, almost half, of all of India's farms are still totally at the mercy of the unpredictable monsoon rains. And that delicate, risky balance is exactly why this whole system was built in the first place.
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the big picture. Then we'll get into the three-tiered system India uses to classify all this water infrastructure. We'll look at the colossal river projects, then shift gears to the millions of smaller local schemes, and finally wrap up with the huge challenges and potential solutions for the future.
First up, watering a nation. You see, this is way more than just concrete and canals. It's the very foundation of food security, the fundamental ability to feed one of the world's biggest populations year in and year out.
So how on earth do you manage something this enormous? Well, that brings us right to our second section, a system of 3 sizes. Because to get a handle on this kind of scale, you need a really clear way to organize it all. And India's solution is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful.
And the absolute key to this entire classification system boils down to one single metric: the Cultivatable Command Area, or CCA. All that means is the total area of land that one project is built to water. That one measurement, that's what determines everything.
And here's exactly how that CCA metric works. It's broken into 3 simple tiers. If a project waters less than 2,000 hectares, it's called a minor project. If it's between 2,000 and 10,000, it's medium. And the absolute giants, the ones serving more than 10,000 hectares, those are the major projects. That's it. This simple framework is the bedrock of how India manages its water.
All right, let's start with the big ones. Section 3, Giants of the Rivers. These are the truly colossal, state-led mega projects that tame India's mightiest rivers. They really are the backbone of the entire system.
And, as you'd expect, these giants are clustered around the country's main river basins. The Ganga Basin alone hosts a staggering 480 of these large-scale projects. The Godavari and Krishna basins aren't far behind. It just shows you how deeply this infrastructure is tied to the flow of India's greatest rivers.
To really wrap your head around the scale, just think about the Indira Gandhi Canal. It's basically a man-made river that stretches for 837 kilometers. That's longer than driving from Paris to Berlin, and it was built to bring life-giving water right into the middle of the Thar Desert. It's just an unbelievable feat of engineering.
And projects like this, they don't just happen overnight. The water source for the canal was secured all the way back in 1960 with a treaty. The first stage wasn't done until 1983, and stage 2, that took until 2010. That's a 50-year commitment just to make a part of the desert bloom.
Okay, so now we're going to make a pretty dramatic shift in scale. We're going from those state-run giants to our 4th section, millions of local schemes. And this is where you see the incredible power of what's called minor irrigation.
Get ready for this number, because it's a big one: 23.14 million. That is how many individual minor irrigation schemes are spread all across India. So this isn't some top-down, centrally planned system. It's a massive, distributed network built on millions of individual efforts.
So where does the water for all these millions of schemes actually come from? Well, this chart tells a really critical part of the story. An overwhelming 94.8% of them are groundwater schemes. We're talking about dug wells and tube wells, pulling water from right beneath the farmer's feet.
And here's what might be the most revealing fact of all: who owns them? Unlike those huge government-built canals, a massive 96.6% of these minor irrigation schemes are privately owned. This is fundamentally a story of individual farmers investing their own money to secure their own water. And you can see this activity is really concentrated in certain areas. States like Uttar Pradesh and Maharashtra are the clear leaders, and together they account for almost a third of all the minor schemes in the entire country. This really shows you which regions are most reliant on this decentralized, groundwater-first approach.
Okay, let's zoom back out for our final section: challenges and future solutions. We've seen the incredible scale and complexity, but now we have to ask the hard question:
How do you sustain this water lifeline for generations to come?
Which brings us to this really fundamental question. Can a system this vast, especially one that depends so heavily on groundwater, really last forever? The pressures on it are just immense, and honestly, the cracks are starting to show.
Here are the three biggest threats. First, the groundwater is being sucked dry at an alarming rate. In farming heartlands like Punjab, the water tables have dropped by a third in just 2 decades. Second, those big canals are leaky, losing up to 40% of their water before it ever reaches a crop. And finally, most farmers are still using old-school flood irrigation, which is just incredibly wasteful.
But there are solutions, and the potential for improvement is enormous. Look at this. Traditional flood irrigation is, at best, about 60% efficient. Modern micro-irrigation, things like drip and sprinkler systems, they can be around 90% efficient. So the technology to save colossal amounts of water, it already exists. And the government has a comprehensive battle plan to fix this. It's called the PMKSY scheme. It's a multi-front attack, really. Finishing the big projects that are already started, developing more minor and groundwater sources smartly, improving the day-to-day water management on the ground, and expanding minor irrigation that uses surface water. It's a massive attempt to upgrade the whole system at once.
And that brings us to our final thought. The achievement of building one of the world's largest irrigation systems is just undeniable. It's an engineering marvel. But the challenge for the 21st century is completely different. Can India now transform this massive, sprawling network into one of the world's smartest and most sustainable? Because really, the future of its food security hangs on that very question.